Secret government programs with hundreds of unsolved cases, files admitting mind control experiments ran for decades, underground missile bases, automatic nuclear launch systems, and mysterious explosions so powerful they're still a mystery over 100 years later. These are declassified discoveries that still don't make sense. So the Air Force ran this program called Project Bluebook from 1952 to 1969, investigating UFO sightings. When they shut it down, the general messaging was along the lines of, "We figured it out, nothing to see here." But then the actual files got released to the public through the National Archives. They looked into 12,618 sightings over those years, and out of all those cases, 701 were officially marked as unidentified, so unsolved, unexplained. We're not talking about vague reports from random people. A lot of these came from military pilots, radar operators, people who track planes for a living, and they were describing objects doing things that shouldn't be possible. Sudden, crazy acceleration, turning at perfect right angles, or just sitting there in the air with no visible engines or propulsion. And here's the thing. In a bunch of these cases, radar picked up the same objects that people were seeing with their own eyes. So you can't just wave it away as reflections or weather balloons when the technology is confirming what witnesses saw. The Air Force's official line was that these unexplained cases didn't show any threat and no evidence of advanced technology. But when you actually read the files, it's not really what they show. What they actually show is investigators running into dead ends and having to just mark it as unidentified before moving on. Bluebook didn't technically prove anything extraordinary happened, but it didn't disprove everything either. MK Ultra wasn't some conspiracy theory that leaked online. It got confirmed in 1975 when the CIA director at the time, William Colby, went before Congress and admitted the agency ran a secret mind control research program for more than 20 years. It started in 1953 and involved experiments with LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, psychological torment methods, really dark stuff. And there's still a lot we actually don't even know after documents got declassified. In 1973, the CIA director, Richard Helms, ordered basically all the MK Ultra files destroyed. Most of what survived only made it because of a mistake. Around 20,000 financial documents got missed. Someone found them later through a Freedom of Information Act request. Those surviving records prove that experiments happened on people who had no clue they were part of anything. Prisoners, hospital patients, regular people just living their lives. Some got dosed with psychedelics for days straight without knowing or agreeing to it. At least one person died, Frank Olson, in 1953, and that death got linked back to the program later. What's missing is the actual results. There's no clear record of what worked, what didn't, or how far they actually took this research. Congress even admitted that we'll never know the full scope of MK Ultra because the evidence just doesn't exist anymore. So you've got this confirmed program that ran for decades with real victims, and there's no complete record of what they did or what they actually got out of it. In 1959, the US Army built a base underneath the ice in Greenland called Camp Century. They told everyone it was a peaceful science research station. The truth didn't come out until way later, when documents got declassified showing Camp Century was actually a cover for something called Project Iceworm, a plan to hide nuclear missiles under the ice. The idea was to dig thousands of miles of tunnels, put up to 600 nuclear missiles down there that could hit the Soviet Union with almost no warning. The engineers thought the ice sheet would stay stable enough to hold this whole network. It didn't. The ice kept shifting, crushing tunnels, and messing up the rail systems that they built to move the missiles around. By 1967, they gave up on the whole thing. They shut down the base and just left it to get buried by snow. What got left behind included radioactive waste, diesel fuel, and sewage. The Army figured the ice would just bury everything forever, but of course, climate research now shows they were completely wrong about that. Studies from 2016 confirmed that ice melting could eventually expose all that waste, but you don't really need a scientist to tell you that, do you? In July 1952, unidentified objects showed up on radar screens over Washington, D.C. Happened across multiple radar systems, including Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base. Air traffic controllers watched objects moving way faster than any known aircraft, then suddenly stopping or changing direction. They sent fighter jets up on 2 different weekends. Both times, the radar targets disappeared when the jets got close. then came back after the planes left. Civilian pilots also reported seeing bright lights hovering and moving around in restricted airspace over the capital. The Air Force later said it was temperature inversions, basically unusual atmospheric conditions that caused false radar readings. But documents that got released later show that a lot of the radar operators and scientists involved didn't really buy that explanation. Temperature inversions were already known about, and they didn't usually create coordinated targets moving across multiple systems the same way. This whole thing caused enough panic that it led to the biggest press conference the Pentagon had ever held at that point. Officials played it down, but the declassified reports show people disagreed behind the scenes about what actually happened. In August 1990, two hikers near Calvine, Scotland took pictures of a large diamond-shaped object hanging in the sky. There was also a jet visible in at least one photo, which gave you a sense of how big this thing was. The guys sent the photos to a newspaper, and the newspaper passed them to the UK Ministry of Defence. After that, the photos just vanished. For decades, the Calvine incident only existed in written mentions in declassified Ministry of Defence files. Officials confirmed the photos were real, but they said they didn't have them anymore. They never gave a public explanation of what the object was. And then in 2022, one of the original photos showed up again through a former Ministry of Defense press officer. The image showed this sharp-edged object with no visible propulsion or design that matched any known aircraft from that time, or any time for that matter. But the MOD kept saying it posed no threat and didn't need to be investigated further. The UK government didn't say it was extraterrestrial, but they also didn't identify it as an experimental aircraft, and they also didn't call it a hoax. In 2007, the CIA declassified a bunch of internal documents called the Family Jewels. These weren't intelligence reports meant for the public. They were records of stuff the agency itself thought was illegal, improper, or just embarrassing. The files were originally put together in 1973 after Watergate, when CIA leadership was scared things would get exposed. What the documents showed was disturbing in how straightforward and blunt it was. It confirmed that there was decades of spying on US citizens domestically, programs where they opened people's mail, wiretapped people without warrants, and detailed actual plans to take out foreign leaders like Fidel Castro. And some of the schemes were comic levels of ridiculous. They tried using a poisoned cigar and a booby-trapped seashell on him, neither worked. But what still doesn't add up about all this is how incomplete the whole picture is. Documents reference other operations without explaining them, or mention that related files got destroyed. Sometimes they describe actions with no context about who authorized them or how far things went. Congressional investigations later said they could never fully piece together what the CIA was doing during that period. For decades after World War II, NATO countries publicly presented themselves as democracies defending against the Soviets. What didn't get disclosed until the 90s was Operation Gladio, a network of secret soldiers operating across Europe. These units were trained in sabotage and were supposed to resist if the Soviets invaded. They existed in countries like Italy, Belgium, France, and Germany. The controversy started when investigators began connecting Gladio groups to domestic terror, especially in Italy. Some attacks that got blamed on extremist groups were later suspected of having connections to these secret networks. The courts never fully agreed on how deep that involvement went, and what still doesn't make sense is the lack of clarity about who controlled what. Governments admitted the networks existed, but they denied responsibility for criminal acts tied to them. Most records were redacted or destroyed. A secret army operating for decades inside democratic countries is already strange enough. The fact that nobody can fully explain what it did, who ordered what, or how much damage it caused makes Gladio one of the most disturbing and interesting leaked secrets from the Cold War. In 2020 and 2021, the US Department of Defense officially declassified and released reports on unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. These were encounters recorded by Navy pilots using advanced radar, infrared cameras, and tracking systems. There were dozens of incidents where objects showed no visible propulsion and flew in bizarre patterns that didn't match any known aircraft. Some accelerated instantly, others hovered in high winds or dropped from altitude down to sea level in seconds. The government was careful with how they worded things. They didn't claim they came from space. They also didn't offer explanations for a lot of the encounters. Several got categorized as unresolved, even after intelligence agencies analyzed them. But these objects were seen multiple times in restricted military airspace, sometimes near aircraft carriers. If they were foreign technology, that's a serious security concern. If they weren't, the question becomes, what exactly was being detected? Where are these things coming from? And after decades of denial and making fun of people who talked about this stuff, the US government publicly admitted it encounters objects that it can't identify. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union developed a system called Perimeter, later nicknamed Dead Hand. Declassified information after the USSR fell confirmed that it was real. The system was designed to automatically launch nuclear missiles if Soviet leaders got wiped out in a first strike. So, if certain conditions were met and nobody overrode the command, the system would retaliate on its own. Former Soviet officers confirmed that this system was active for years, and Russia has never fully came out and said whether or not the system is still running. And that has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next one.